Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to Talent and Growth, our roundtable webinar series. Thank you for locking on, whether you're live with us on LinkedIn or if you're catching up on the podcast. So we're going to be talking today around how to get it right with stakeholder management. Now, I often talk to my partners and clients around what candidates want. I always like to kind of share trends and data. And the joke I say right now is that candidates want everything. You know, they want the high money, they want the flexibility, they want the L&D, they want the whole lot. Well, guess what? The stakeholders want exactly the same thing. Stakeholders want everything that you can get them. They want the person in the budget. They want all the skills. And so the key to success, I think, or a big key to success for talent acquisition is making sure we get those relationships right, make sure we're seen as a trusted partner, a strategic advisor, and that stakeholder management. If you could be the best recruiter in the world, if you don't have that stakeholder management part nailed, you're going to find life really, really difficult. So that's what we're going to be talking about today with our esteemed panel. We're going to be finding out how they do it, what they've done well, what they advise, and hopefully we'll come away from today's conversation a little bit wiser and a little bit better at managing our stakeholders. So we'll go to some introductions. So Joey, I'll welcome you back to the webinar series. Thanks for being with us again. Please do give us a little bit of an intro into who you are and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. I'm Joey Coxel. I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm the Global Talent Acquisition Manager at a sustainable company called EVBucks. And I've been in the industry just over 18 years, working quite internationally. I'm a specialist tech recruiter, also a sourcing specialist as well. It's me, Joey.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joey. And Margaret, first time in the webinar, but welcome back to Talent and Growth. We, of course, had a great episode last year focused on training our managers around interviews, if I remember correctly. But please do give a little intro into yourself and who you are and what you do.
Yes, so thank you for inviting me. My name is Margaret Bui. I am currently a principal recruiter at a SaaS company called Mixmax. I've worked in recruitment since 2005, and I've hired across all different functions and different levels for technology companies. So both global companies such as VMware, Cisco, Microsoft, Expedia, tech startups and scale-ups such as Yieldify, King, Typeform, and now Mixmax, and also in consulting at Avanade. So yes, really happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks, Margaret. And last but not least, first time on Talent and Growth in any format. Christian, we'll be kind to you as it's your first time, but welcome to it. And please do give us an intro into who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the invite. Hi, everyone. I'm Christian Slaney. I'm based in Belfast, and I'm currently head of talent at Biconomy, which is a blockchain scale-up where we're fully remote, but joined there in September and have been growing the team there. I'm a tech recruiter, and prior to Biconomy, I've worked in a number of industries across sort of SaaS, fintech, investment banking. But yeah, look forward to the discussion with you all today.
Fantastic. And I always forget to do this every week, but people do ask questions anyway, but I never actually invite people to do so. So audience, if you would like to ask any questions, please do. And any good ones, I'll certainly be asking to our panel. So let's kick things off. So let's start with you, Margaret. What's your approach to building relationships with stakeholders in your organization? What strategies have you found to be the most effective?
Guys, I mean, firstly, like relationship building, and you've kind of mentioned that, is really the number one thing that you need to be good at if you're going to be successful at recruitment, because you can't source exceptional candidates, give them outstanding candidate experience, and place them into the role without being skilled at building great relationships. And in terms of building the relationships with hiring managers, you know, as recruiters, we know that a good relationship with with our hiring managers can mean the difference between feeling like a job well done and one that's fallen a little short of everyone's expectations. So I think communication, and I'm sure everyone will say the same, but communications is everything when it comes to learning how to work with different stakeholders. We're human, so everything we do and say has the possibility of being misunderstood. But with clear, effective communication, we can save on time and frustrations along the way, you know, just helping you to get the job done correctly from the start and avoiding any kind of backtrack. So what does good communication look like, right? So for one hiring manager, this might mean over communicating and keeping them in the loop regularly for updates. I've certainly had hiring managers who almost wanted to be updated daily. For others, this may only want, they might only want to be notified of big changes, and they want to receive weekly updates. So it's just really about finding out what works for that particular relationship. And also it's really important, like, as a recruiter, do you fully understand the organization and the roles that you're hiring for? And then does your hiring manager fully understand recruitment and the candidate management process? So good stakeholder management aligns those differences in expertise and experience. And it's just done through clear communication and building strong relationships. So some of the things I've done that I think have worked really well is open communication from the very beginning. So you want to show them that you're human. If it's a new hiring manager, get time in the diary as soon as possible to have coffee, and just begin the dialogue of how you're going to work as a team. So talk together about previous partnerships with talent partners, perhaps things they value in the partnerships, just to get a feel for how they like to work. I also think creating expectations early around ways of working, and how that's important, and how this can be adapted to best suit the needs. So I try to book in the time to review my hiring plan with the hiring manager early on, so we can best plan, how to tackle it together. So I think those, and empathy also is a very important trait as a recruiter. So it's just important to me that my hiring managers know that I have their best interests at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting point around the communication side. I think you're absolutely right. Some line managers, stakeholders will want to be communicated in a different way and different frequencies. I think for me, what's really important is to maintain some form of visibility, because chances are you're not sat next to your hiring manager. So you might disappear for 2 weeks. You could be working your ass off, doing 12-hour days of screening calls. But if they don't see that, if they don't know, then they might think, well, where are they? Where have they gone? And that can kind of maybe help them, maybe cause them to lose a bit of trust. So perhaps keeping maybe an update and weekly at least visibility, so they know what you're doing, what you've done, is so important, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And often hiring managers don't actually realize what goes into recruitment. They just think that you're going to receive a few applications, screen them. They don't actually realize how much work can go into recruitment. So yeah, exactly, staying visible and making them understand, because we all know different roles require different kind of workload, But I think some maybe new hiring managers, they might just kind of think, that HR just grabs a few applications. They're just really not aware of how much work can actually go into some roles.
Absolutely. Christian, so you're working in a remote first business, which can present its own challenges around kind of building those relationships. Absolutely. So do you want to talk us through some of your approaches to building relationships with stakeholders, perhaps recently or perhaps from before?
Yeah, sure, Paul. So I think that topic about visibility is absolutely key. So for some people, visibility is an email, and for other hiring managers, they want sort of a regular cadence of calls. And both of those situations are okay. The key is you need to establish that right at the start of your process with any hiring manager. I agree with Margaret, like anytime there's a new hiring manager coming sort of into a process to kick off with, like get to know them, get to know how they like to work. But also hiring managers that and have worked with before, if there's a new role coming out, make sure to have a similar type of catch up with them, because the role might be a bit different. You might want to iterate on ways that you've worked on the past. So I think like a proper sort of whatever you want to call it, role briefing, kickoff call, that's important every time. But something else I would say just briefly as well is, I think sometimes as recruiters with our stakeholders, we can fall a little bit into the trap of a them and us type situation with our hiring managers. Oh, they want this, but we want to do this. And that sometimes is true. But when it boils down to it, we actually want the same thing. We want to hire a great person for that role. So it's about getting on the same page as your hiring manager right from the off, and working together in a way where everybody's happy.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Joey, anything to add around, I suppose, your own experiences and your strategies to perfect stakeholder management?
Yeah, I totally agree with Margaret and Kristen. I mean, it's all about really maintaining quite good relationship with your stakeholders to minimize the risk, maximize the effectiveness and the trust you want to create it. There are several ways to doing it. Communication is definitely, it's not just the communication, transparency with them. Consistency is also the key to that. Not just also promising and aiming we will do it. Is about consistency of your delivery outcomes as well is very, very important. But rest of it, Christian and Margaret already mentioned that.
Gotcha. Well, I'll stay with you, Joey. So a couple of months ago now, we ran a webinar on the importance of data, and you were kindly a guest on that. So why don't we talk around that a little bit, and I suppose the role of metrics and data in managing stakeholders and how we can use that to influence and drive the decision making that we want and need.
Yeah, definitely. What I usually use, to me, is one of the most crucial things. There are several ways doing it. In-tech meetings. In-tech meetings are the best time to really engage and gain a trust and, put a show on, and to be able to play the advisor role as a TA specialist. Well, what I normally do using data, I bring my previous sourcing details. I create some personas regarding to that. When I say personas, it's not just about the hard skills and soft skills. I'm talking about job families, job grades. It's about the team around it and expectation from the team and the previous searches. Plus, I bring talent market reports, which is crucial at the moment. Instead of coming up hopes and dreams, you bring a proper database report so you can show it to them what is the market looks like. And then lastly, I like to do a pair sourcing. So it's all about data, working with them on that intake meetings. It takes an hour and a half, but it adds so much value and gain a great trust. So that is one of the part of the data I use to gain trust and show my ambassadorship as a TA to my stakeholders.
With you, fantastic, Christian. What role does data and metrics play for you?
Yeah, it's massive because especially for recruiters like me who typically work with tech stakeholders, and this would also go with sales. How they make decisions in their own function is always based on data. Bringing out a new product, a certain type of sales technique, they will make decisions based on data. So they're going to respond, much more strongly to something that you're putting forward if it's backed up with data than if it's just an opinion. So yeah, you've got your conversion rates are a really important one when you're in the middle of a process. That's telling you where the breakdown, if any, is in the process. Someone's used the analogy before. You don't want to keep pouring water into a jug with a hole in it, so you want to fix the hole before you put more water in. I think that's really well described. So it helps you really to become a partner with your stakeholders. But you can't do that without the data. So I would say at the start of any process, establish with your stakeholder what data do you want to track. Then work out how are you going to track it. Lift the hood on your ATS. Does it do it? And crucially, does it do it accurately? And then if not, work out how you can automate it separately, or you may have to do it manually. But the key point is to make sure you're gathering those data points that are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Margaret, anything to finish on that one?
Yeah, no, I actually agree with everything you've said so far. I think presenting and sharing insightful, relevant data helps hiring managers to understand the bigger picture. Like what's happening, who's responsible for what, the proposed timelines for each stage of the hiring process. So, where I've used data, it's a number of different things. firstly, in terms of maybe presenting how much work has already been done, or taking the insights from, say, LinkedIn Talent Insights. So let's say you have a hiring manager who's looking for something very, very specific. I remember I was working on this role at Avanade where there was something super specific with Microsoft technologies and super specific locations that the hiring manager wanted this person in Germany. Because I've already done similar work, I knew it was going to be quite hard. So again, I found the LinkedIn Talent Report Insights to show them that I think the talent pool is like 13 people, like 13, right? So it's like, okay, well, where can we be a little bit more flexible if we really want someone in that specific location? So definitely at that stage, also in terms of how many people have applied, how many people have moved to the first interview stage, how many people moved to second interview stage, offer stage, where do people drop off most often? Is it at the first interview? Is it at the technical interview? If your ATS doesn't have that data, you might need to have it done manually. So a few years ago, I worked for a company where our ATS was very basic because it was a startup. So I had someone from the business change team create this a really great spreadsheet with macros, etc. Like I wouldn't know how to build, but it was amazing. Even though I had to enter the details manually in terms of how many people applied for a specific role, how many people went through, first, second, third interview, it was really great at showing me, okay, where do people drop off, and then how can we maybe address the issues? Like if they drop off at the technical interview stage, can we potentially look at that? So yeah, having data in that respect would be great. And also like in terms of what's happening in the process. So in my last company, prior to this one at Typeform, I was hiring a lot of engineers, and there were, a lot of engineers for many different teams. And often the hiring managers, even though they had access to Greenhouse, which was our ATS, they often wanted to know, okay, well, how many people do we have at system design interview stage? How many people at offer stage? So we actually use Trello for that, that was giving them, our stakeholders, instant visibility, just using like snapshot of the recruitment pipeline to provide quick fire updates of who's in the process. So it was, again, it took a while to like put it together, but later it was very easy. You just move one candidate from, coding interview to a system design interview, and how many people were rejected. So that snapshot was great. It was actually really easy for me as well, because I had so many candidates and so many roles open. And on that Trello spreadsheet, it was like a, great visibility for everyone, including for myself.
With you, thank you for sharing that. We've got a question that's come through, which is from Bryony, who says, where do I get talent market reports? So for me, I would suggest signing up to Hired. I'd suggest signing up to Workable, all of which produce really, really good reporting. Joey, I know, is a big fan of Recruiting Brain Food, much like I am. Some of that stuff, bit too intelligent for me sometimes, but still it's really worth looking at, and that will give you some good data. Anything else, Joey, that you think in terms of talent market reports, any good places to go?
Yeah, definitely. Margaret mentioned about the talent insights is good. Really gives you a deep dive analytics regarding to the market from data from LinkedIn. But there are other platforms which I really, really like. Talent Neuron is by Gartner, is really detailed, really good reports. It might need to work a little bit manual work, but they got a great benchmark and automatic benchmarks as well. And then lately, one UK-based company I'm really, really interested in to find out more is the I'll try to remember the name. Horsefly. Yes, Horsefly. It's very similar to Talent Neuron, but it does the job greatly. And then last time when I talked to them, they were updating for salary indications as well, which is Talent Insights doesn't give salary. Talent Neuron and Horsefly, they give also salary indication for the roles as well.
Perfect, loads there. Margaret, Talent Insights, anything else that you'll go to?
No, I don't think so. I actually didn't even know of some of these. I mostly use LinkedIn Talent Insights reports, so nothing else to add.
Yeah, Horsefly is good actually. I've played around with that. And Christian, any other data tools or places you get your data from? Sorry.
Talent Insights would have been the main one I'd have used as well. I've heard Ravio is pretty good for kind of market data as well, albeit I haven't sort of looked into it in detail. But yeah, there's lots of platforms out there, so you just want to find what's kind of capturing the stuff that's most relevant for you.
Perfect. Bryony says, thank you. Bryony, you're welcome. Hope that helped. Christian, so how do we, when we're talking about stakeholders, we're probably actually focusing more on the hiring manager, I suppose, naturally, because they're typically the people we're kind of sourcing for. But of course, there's other functions in the business we need to be thinking about, of course. So it could be the HR business partners. It could be the people who are in charge of the budgets, your CFO. So how do we make sure everyone is happy? Is that possible, first of all? And if so, how do we make that so?
Sometimes it's not possible, that's the truth, but you need to do your best. Something that everybody does is whenever they have something that they need done, they assume that they are your main priority just as you are theirs, which isn't always the case. So I think a key sort of topic here is transparency. If you have somebody asking you to do something which is sort of a couple of steps down in your to-do list based on what else you've got on, you need to sort of just step up and let them know. If that's causing a bit of a problem, go into more detail. Just say, look, well, actually, I've got to do this, which is super urgent. It's time bound, and I will get to yours let's say Thursday or whenever it's going to be. So, give them a commitment and stick to it. The commitment doesn't have to be that day if that's not achievable, but give them a commitment and stick to it, because then they have something to work towards. And the more that you do that, the more you build trust, and trust is actually a key sort of word in this whole sort of space. The better you build a relationship with your stakeholder, the more trust you build. So if you can build that trust, then the next time they come to you and you make a commitment, that they might relax a little bit more quickly.
Absolutely. So manage the expectations, do what you say you're going to do, and my advice would be to absolutely under promise and over deliver rather than the other way around, or you could end up in all sorts of bother. Margaret, how do you balance the different needs of the different stakeholders in this ecosystem?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree about transparency. Like if you can't do something right now, or you can't do something at the time you are going to do something, maybe you are going to provide a shortlist by the end of next week, but something much more urgent came up. I think it's good to communicate that earlier, not on Friday. As an example, definitely under promising and over delivering is always a good strategy. I think keeping candidates updated, I know we talked about hiring managers, but I think keeping candidates updated is super important. So like, let's say I have a candidate in the process. I was kind of supposed to get back to them this week, but I still haven't got the information. I don't keep the candidate waiting for 2 weeks. I would just message them and say, I know I was going to message you today, but I'm still waiting for feedback, or the hiring manager is away, whatever the situation might be. But I just let them know I haven't forgotten about them. And providing feedback later, I think it's very important as well. That's something I always do, always provide feedback to candidates who have interviewed with us. Same again, it's like with HR business partner, it obviously different companies have different setups, but again, working with them from the start, like if they are the one responsible for the budget or giving me salary ranges, if I have someone out of the range, I will discuss it with them at the start, not when we're at an offer stage, or if someone requires, relocation or sponsorship, which is not something we do in my current company, but I did that in previous organizations. Again, that's something that I would discuss at the start of the process, not at the end, because I've had situations when, something like that happens, like you find out at the final stage that the candidate needs a visa or whatever. That should never happen. All of these situations should be resolved at the start of the process. So yeah, just the communication, transparency, and I think like looking ahead as well. Like who you might need to talk to right now so that you avoid any problems at an offer stage.
Yeah, and with all that, Joey, what apart from the things we've talked about, and we've talked about a few things, what are some of the mistakes that people can make when managing stakeholders, in your opinion, and how can we avoid them?
Well, I think we discussed it a little bit. There's so much opportunity to make a mistake, really. Overpromise, and I will do it. Lack of information, lack of attention to details, and you think you know, but actually you don't know. So these are the key. We really need to reflect ourselves and exceed the expectations. To be able to do that is really understand what they need and make sure you do your due diligence for that. I mean, in-house is I would suggest to my team, my colleagues all the time, have a regular meetings instead of chasing each other. I'm supposed to get back to you. You're supposed to get back to me. Try to avoid those kind of things. Weekly or bi-weekly, depends on your calendar. Allows you to do that. Arrange those regular meetings so you can update each other on those days. Candidates are slightly different because it's quite live 24/7, and I would suggest to avoid any mistakes towards candidate, because they are quite a big stakeholders for you as well. You can use some automation systems, but careful when I say automation, not the reach out automation. It's just regular updates to them, and then you can keep them warm to be able to make sure you don't ghost on them, because you can easily forget how busy we are. Sometimes you can forget candidates if they're not on the latest stage. It happens, you got to hands up and admit it. So to be able to avoid those kind of mistakes, to minimize any risk, so it's really top on everything, and make sure kind of develop a system is prioritize two big your stakeholders in-house stakeholders, your managers, your hiring managers, HR business partner, your sub teams, and other 50% is your candidates. So really your all weekly objectives should be around them.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and I think there's a lot of mistakes that can be made along the way. And I think if you're in a position where you're building a relationship with a new stakeholder, hopefully they're going to be really excited to be working with you and really looking forward to you finding the right people. But they may not be. They may be looking for a reason to go and do something else, like use an agency they like, or maybe they preferred working with your predecessors. So you've got to make sure I suppose you're ticking all those boxes for yourself and not allowing for any mistakes to come up along the end and keeping the visibility, as the speaker has said. Any other mistakes, Christian, that you see people make around managing the stakeholders that are just like big no-nos?
Yeah, Joey briefly mentioned over-promising there, and I think that's a big one. And I think we can sort of fall into the trap early on in our career of almost paying our stakeholders too much respect and saying yes to everything, and that can actually be a habit that's hard to let go of, because you're so eager to please, which in a way isn't a bad thing, but it can result in problems down the line. So I think it's really important when you get to a stage where you're confident in what you're doing, what processes work, how you want to run your process. You need to approach your stakeholders with a certain level of confidence, and not to be afraid to push back. Some of your stakeholders will have hired extensively in the past. I'm talking about hiring managers here, and others may not have. But in either case, their opinions or ideas may not be completely up to date. The market changes so quickly, especially if you're hiring in tech. So, it's important to go into your catch-ups with your stakeholders with confidence. As we said earlier, back it up with data so that you come across as credible. But yeah, don't be afraid to push back on their potentially outdated methods, and go in as a trusted sort of advisor. And I think working in that way, you can, again, build trust with your stakeholder and build a process that's actually going to work and is relevant to the market.
Yeah, I'm with that. Margaret, how do we, I suppose, if we want to communicate that value of what we do to stakeholders, and maybe we could think about those stakeholders who may prefer another method. Maybe they like doing all the hiring themselves. Maybe they like using their favorite recruitment agent. Maybe they like, like the person who did the job before you. Is it that use of data, or is there other things we can do to really make them understand how important we are and the value we can add?
Yeah, use of data, absolutely. I think, the problem is that sometimes stakeholders are removed from the process. They don't understand the work that goes into filling the role. However, they do have deeper understanding of, what it takes to be the perfect match for the position. So I think involving stakeholders at the very early stage of the hiring process, because I've seen companies where, kind of the role will come from, not even sure, more like from HR, and the stakeholder is only involved at a later stage, And I think having that kind of, having the intake meeting right at the front with the hiring manager, so they can provide really like good insights into what they need, and take ownership of the process early on, then obviously they more likely to find what they are looking for. Sometimes it's definitely data. So for example, I've had hiring managers who, I've actually remember in one of my contract roles, I was working with a VP of marketing, and she had 2 positions open, and she was working with a couple of agencies that she really enjoyed working with. And, she like, if I just came in on my day one and say, you're not gonna be able to work with them, or just work with me, I don't think she would actually have appreciated that, right? With that specific hiring manager. So with her, I was like, okay, great. Let me take over the relationship. I will screen the agency candidates, and I will screen my candidates, and then you can pick the best ones, and just let me manage the process, so it all coming from for one person. And that's actually how I've proved my value to her, because with those specific roles, I filled one position. The agency actually filled the other position, but with all the new positions coming up later, she again trusted me to work with her. She trusted that I will be able to manage the process and find the right candidate. So sometimes it doesn't really work to tell them, be very precise about what they can do. Sometimes it just takes time to prove your value. Just trying to think, the stakeholders who might not see it as a priority. I mean, I've had stakeholders who, they tell me it's urgent, but then I have no feedback. They've interviewed the candidates, there's 1 week of no feedback. If you work in the same office, it's a lot easier, because you can just go to the desk and ask them. But when they're abroad or based in different locations, when they're not responding to you, I mean, I've had situations when after chasing someone quite extensively, I would just tell them, I understand it's not a priority right now, just to let you know, I'm stopping the process on this role right now, and let me know when you're ready to restart, and let me know when you're ready to, just devote some time to hiring. And that, I think, be confident as well about doing that, because it's not a great candidate experience if you can't provide feedback, right? And if the hiring manager is too busy right now, typically something like that will make them just like wake up and, yes, and with some busy hiring managers, even at the start of the process, and people who might not see it as a priority, I'm like, can you just block some times in your diary, because you will have a lot of interviews. So can you block some times in your diary for every week? And then I would just, instead of going backwards and forwards, at least I knew these are the slots. That's when I can book the candidate in. So yeah, things like that will be the main ones.
Yeah, and with that, and Joey, have you got any, I suppose, examples of how you've done that around really proving the value of what you do to stakeholders who maybe who needed to be shown that they were going to they would get some value out of you?
Yeah, I don't want agency to upset with me now. They're all valuable. I don't want them to get upset with it. It's end of the day, with all due respect to everybody, we really fishing from the same pool. It's about not a competition, it's about adding a value, internal talent acquisition. So I did although communicate with the agency, I said we will be also looking after in-house, and then we give them the agency the chance to look after it. That was in my previous area, and actually we deliver a lot quicker than agency did. So it wasn't about showing them agency we are better than agencies. It's just about, we have a better source, we got a better engagement, and because it's straight through engage with the candidate instead of third party. Some areas you need it for prioritizing, but we proved that to my quite a high level stakeholder that we capable to do headhunting in-house as well. And normally we were expecting as a KPI 6 months to fill that role. We did it in 3 months, purely using data, purely using the proper recruitment process, making it a lot shorter, more efficient, blocking the calendars and stuff. It helped us a lot overall. And that through that in-house talent acquisition recruitment team can also achieve great things the agency can achieve.
Just to actually add to that, that's such a great point. I've had hiring managers who they really wanted to use an agency, and I'd be like, give me they wanted to use a search firm for a sales director position. The agency said it's going to be 5 to 6 weeks to deliver a shortlist. I was like, just give me a couple of weeks to see what I can do. And actually, I had a shortlist of amazing candidates within a week. I know it was quite quick, but sales director is kind of visible in the organization, so it's easy to approach them. So yeah, even like asking them to give you a chance for a week or two if they're really desperate to use an agency, because quite often you can actually deliver quicker.
Yeah, I think as well, when you were talking about, I suppose, the value of us versus embedded talent or internal, whatever it is, versus the agency, I think the benefits of, let me flip it around, the benefits of working on the agency side, if a role's not going your way, you can just disappear, you can vanish. If you're working internally at a business, there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide. And I think the hiring manager needs to understand, say, look, I'm not going anywhere until this job's filled, okay? This is my job to do it. And I think once they understand that can really help as well, can't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say as well, you need to, sometimes there's preconceived ideas. So I remember whenever I was working in investment bank, the hiring managers just had this idea where if you were working with an agency, that was headhunted talent, because that was the only route that they would use, which is fair enough. And then internal, that's just applications, which maybe in some companies is true, but certainly not always. So again, it's about that idea of transparency. Walking the hiring manager through your process. Yes, you may look through that applicants and put forward anybody relevant, but also you can fulfill that headhunting piece as well. So being transparent about what you're actually doing and maybe getting rid of inaccurate preconceived ideas is important.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And Christian, I suppose I'll stay with you actually. What, in terms of those hiring processes, we've talked about a little bit around this, but how can we make sure we're really managing stakeholders' expectations along that journey? And what strategies do we kind of make sure we're using to keep people understand the timeline and the outcomes? Is it just constant communication, constant updates?
Yes, and also agreeing at the start what any KPIs are. So that also comes on to you as the recruiter. So how long is it going to take you to get a shortlist, like what Margaret was talking about? But then from their side, what's the agreed time for feedback on tech tests that are submitted, for interview feedback, and work together on those. Of course, you can advise, but don't just tell them what the KPI should be. Work with them on something that is realistic, because if you come up with that KPI together, then they're more likely to stick to it rather than you demanding that it must be within 24 hours. Because that creates that them and us atmosphere that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, Paul, I mean, apart from that, it's about working together throughout the process, analyzing, what's working, what's not, and addressing problems quickly, because it's easier to address problems early on rather than later on, after it affects a lot more candidates and you might have to make some changes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think nobody likes surprises. There should be no surprises along that journey. We've got good questions coming, actually. I like this. So Kobe's asked, do you have any advice for junior recruiters dealing with senior stakeholders who are much more experienced than they are and might be afraid to push back? And I think, we were talking earlier on about kind of, pushing back, which is absolutely right. But if you are a junior person and, you're dealing with a CTO or someone like that, then how do you... What advice would we give to the more junior people out there? Joey, you were giggling a bit to that one, so why don't I go over to you and you can tell us your answer.
Yeah, of course, that would be my pleasure to answer Kobe's question. It's all about really onboarding it and seniors to work along. Is they should really start to kind of shadow the senior ones going along, and then they should give it a chance to be able to work with the higher stakeholders, and it's just experience is the key. And if they can follow up the senior guys or the leads, how they handle the process, how they do the intake, how they manage the candidate journey, that could be a great way to juniors to learn, and then they can really use their own initiative to be able to take it the next step for themselves to experience directly. But to me, I really wouldn't want to put the juniors straight away to do big stakeholders. That can be overwhelming. That can be, inexperience could turn it around from excitement to be anxiety. So we really need to be careful on that one. That should be always mentor, coach, whatever you want to call, should really guide them alongside with them.
I agree. Yeah.
Great advice. Any other advice, Christian? You got something there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep banging the same drum, but this does come back to data as well, Kobe. So like we said earlier, data makes you much more credible. But what's going to be key for you if you're maybe a little bit unsure is that you need to understand data. It's very easy just to come on a call and just read numbers out, or just present a sheet of numbers. But that doesn't bring any value. So you want to really learn how to read data. What are the patterns? What is it telling you, and how do you solve the problems that you might identify? Now, that might sound like a lot to take on. So, work with people in your network, Kobe, who are maybe, more experienced at doing that. And once you pick up those skills, which you can do remotely away from your stakeholder catch-ups, then you can bring those skills into those catch-ups prepared, and you're in a much better position to start pushing back from there.
Yeah, agreed. One of the tricky situations, so thanks, Kobe, for that. Thank you for asking the question. It's a good one. One of the questions, one of the things that come up, I think, probably for all of us in talent acquisition, is going back to this managing the different stakeholders in the business. And I'm going to give a specific example. One being, if your boss, who is probably in the TA team or the HR team, has given you a budget to go and find a certain person for a certain role in a certain position, so that's fine. However, hiring manager says, listen, don't worry, we'll get 10, 15 grand more on this. Don't worry, just get me the people and I'll work it out later on. So you've then got conflicting messages from two people. Now, I've experienced that a few times. I don't know if anyone else has, but Margaret, you're nodding slightly there. If you've experienced that, what is the advice there? And again, I actually go back to what Kobe said. If you're a junior person, you're in a tough conundrum. What do you do?
I think I would actually talk to your head of talent first, because the hiring manager might think they'll be able to get some budget later, but that's actually not always the case. I've had situations before when the hiring manager, years and years ago that the hiring manager actually went ahead and interviewed people without telling TA. But mind you, that hasn't happened for many years. It was like many, many years ago in some organizations. So the hiring manager, like literally quietly went to interview people. And they're like, okay, I have this candidate I want to make an offer to. And then suddenly HR and the recruitment finds out, at that stage. So I think there's no, in a situation when the hiring manager says, well, I'm definitely going to get the budget later, I would really just try to find out, can you definitely get this budget, and just try to find people within the budget that actually has been allocated. Because in so many companies that I've worked for, you will actually not be able to increase the budget by that much, like if it's already within the maximum level for the position, you might not be able to do that later. So just to avoid the situation when you have a candidate later who's looking for 15,000 more than what your maximum salary is at that level, and then you can't proceed, that's kind of a waste of time for everyone, right? So I would just really try to, and if you're a junior recruiter yourself, get your head of talent to speak to the hiring manager. You don't necessarily need to do it yourself, but I think with someone like that, I would just try to make sure that there is a budget before we start talking to people. But I'm just trying to look at difficult stakeholders, because difficult stakeholders can mean different things, right? It's not just that one. Like one of my most difficult stakeholders, I won't even mention the name of the company but one of my most difficult stakeholders was someone who was just incredibly abrupt and incredibly just like not a warm person at all. He was a senior guy in a director position who had to hire people with some specific, like I think Adobe campaign skills for his specific team. And because we couldn't, well, that was actually one other thing. He wanted to find a permanent person at a specific like salary level, say 45,000, which actually was pretty much impossible because everyone of that experience had 10, 15 years of experience. They were all contractors earning 400,000 plus per day, 400 per day. And another issue with that specific.
Oops.
Oh no, Margaret's
frozen. Contractor.
Oh, she's back.
And the agency, so 3 agencies actually told me within the same week, listen, like the candidates are saying that this hiring manager is very abrupt. He doesn't listen to what they are saying. He behaves like if they were, he behaves like he's kind of doing them a favor that he's even interviewing them. And it got to the point that the agency would contact the agency, they would contact the candidate and they would say, is that for this guy at this company? And they're like, no, I'm not interested. So that was like one of the most difficult conversations I've had to have with the stakeholder. I mean, initially I was wondering, do I speak to his boss, who was the VP of marketing? But then I was like, if I talk to his boss, he would know it came from me. So I have to have that conversation myself. And I didn't mention all the feedback I've received from the market on this hiring manager because I honestly don't think he would have taken it well. But I mentioned some of the feedback, like kind of gently, and I've asked, how do you handle these conversations? And I gave him some feedback, which he actually did listen to. But it's really hard. With some people, it's actually really hard, especially if they're going to get defensive and they're much more senior than you. And I was already pretty senior in that role, and I still found this conversation super difficult. I was very nervous before the meeting. So I can just imagine how difficult it would be if you are a pretty junior recruiter and you're dealing with someone who's like quite intimidating.
Yeah, I'm with you. Joey, have you come across any situations like the one I described, I suppose, where you've got, TA director giving you one objective, hiring manager saying, listen, don't worry, let's do it this way. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, this has really come down to, again, talk about build the trust and credibility in every stakeholders, because your manager's stakeholders as well and your business stakeholder as well. Really sticking to your process. Again, intake meetings are crucial. Align with what we're going to do. I mean, if they can request it, of course, that can be discussed, transparently, can be shared with your own manager as well, to align what we're going to act upon it. But end of the day, is it crucial for your business? You want to, get the best for your stakeholders, and communication can be done before the act. If they go to the agencies, let them be to discuss with the agencies. But the key is that please align beforehand, not just are they going to use it, also the job grades, job families, because not putting a budget high, that doesn't mean you will get the best candidates, because there's way more reasons people join you, not just about the salary as well, or getting the best high salary.
Yeah, with you. Look, I think we've covered a lot here, and I'd like to, I suppose, put a bow on it and just kind of go around and get our final top line piece of advice to people who are looking to improve their stakeholder management? Could be they've just joined a new company and they're like, right, where do I start? Or maybe they need to rebuild some bridges. So Christian, if we just start with you as we finish off with everybody, what are the kind of 2 or 3 things, absolute keys to good stakeholder management?
Okay, so I would say don't create a them and us atmosphere. Work together. You want the same thing. Go into your catch-ups confident that you know what you're talking about, because you're the recruiter. It's your industry, and back up what you say with data and stick to your commitments.
Yeah, fantastic. Margaret, what's the top ones for you?
Okay, so be a human, like you're not a robot. So it's often easy to become caught up in technology, especially if you're working remotely. I'm in a fully remote position right now, and forget there's another human being on the other side of the screen. So bring your own personal touch to your approach to stakeholders. I think it's really important, to building strong relationships. So take time to speak to your stakeholders about non-work related matters too, because it can build rapport and help develop that trust. We already talked about communication, so be clear, be concise. If needed, over communicate in the beginning. You will soon find out if it's welcomed or not. Be confident to give feedback. As a skilled recruiter, you should feel comfortable in delivering constructive feedback to your stakeholders, to ensure that best practices are being followed. And the final one, I would say, top-notch time management. The hiring manager's time is often limited, so you need to use the time that you have together wisely. It could be a weekly sync to discuss the current pipeline. It could be a simple update email with last week's activity, and a number of outreach of screening calls. So just find out what works best, what data is required, and set clear frameworks for working. Just make your time with your stakeholders count.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Margaret. And last but not least, Joey, how do you want to finish off this summary of what we need to do to make this work and be really good at stakeholder management?
Yeah, I'm going to make it very, very short and quite punctual from my perspective. I mean, first step to develop and create a stakeholder management strategy is to identify the stakeholder and prioritize them based on their level of impact, power, and interest and influence around it. That will gain a lot of trust, and then rest of the development communication plan will in place.
Perfect. Fantastic. Look, thank you to our speakers today for sharing about stakeholder management and their tips to do good stakeholder management. Thank you for catching up on the podcast or listening live on the webinar. Next week, we're going to be talking about We're going to talk about progression paths, how TA and people functions can put that together to help attract and retain talent. Do follow the Anemo group for all our future events. We're doing these once a week, and we've got great people on like we've had today to talk about certain topics. But again, thank you to our speakers, and I'll see everybody next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.